Welcome to another edition of the Sim Racing Garage. I'm Barry Rowland. In this episode, we'll be reviewing the H3 3DOF motion system from the guys at DOFReality. Here we will take an existing H2 2DOF system and add a traction loss function to it. Time to put it through the SRG's review process and see how it does. So, let's get to it. So we're going to jump right into it and just start assembling the base here. Now this is the base, or the parts for the base, that the whole cockpit's going to be sitting on top of. And it has areas on it to provide for rotation. So yeah, when we're doing the yaw movements, we're going to have rollers that roll on these two tabs over here and this big flat piece over here. I'll show you that a little bit more in detail in a second here. First, let's look at this one. Now, if you also notice, this has got some wheels on it, on the front part. And the idea behind that is this direction is going to be the front of the cockpit, where the pivot point is. As you can see, we have a sealed bearing in here to accept the pivot piece that's going to be on the part that sits on top of here that has wheels on each end of it, and it's going to rotate in the pivot, and the wheels are going to be able to ride on top of this. And you'll see that more in detail once we get to that point. In fact, I think I'm going to go ahead and grab this piece and just let you see how that works. And this piece, again, rectangle bar, like the rest of the theme going on here. And yeah, it's got these little plastic wheels. And it's got a pin in it, right? So the pin's just going to fit right into that seal bearing. And now it can rotate and give us that yaw motion on the front part, right? Okay, so on the rear, we have a nice flat plate there, and that's where a lot of weight's going to be riding. And that's going to be this piece over here, like so. Keep it off my hardware. And I'll bring it over a little bit. And this is pretty cool. It's basically skateboard wheels. At least that's what it looks like to me. And yeah, they're not real soft. They got a pretty hard durometer to them, very firm, but still have a little bit of softness to them. Not sure what the durometer is on that. And this is going to sit on here like this underneath the frame. So we're going to set the current cockpit on here and bolt it on. And then the motor will be sitting up here, and it'll be attached to a bolt that is in a hole in one of the crossing bars here, and then use that motor to push itself back and forth like that. All right, so we'll get to more detail as we assemble this. But I just want to give you guys up front a good idea of what's going on here and why we're building this section. Now, we have two bars here that are going to connect. They're going to be our spreader bars, and there is a hole in one of them that we're going to put an I believe it's an M10 bolt that's going to actually attach to the lever of the motor that's going to run our yaw function. Right, so we'll see how that works when we get to it too. So what I'm going to do real quick is just kind of flip this upside down. And again, I want the wheels be pointing towards the front of the cockpit. If that's, let's say the front's towards me, so it'll be sitting here like this. We'll go ahead and put it there. And we're going to take one of these bars and kind of put it in here. Now, remember, there's two holes in the end of that flange, and both of these bars have two holes in them. We got them right there and right there. So it's two sets of holes, rather. And the same thing going on with this heavy piece. This thing's heavy. It's got that steel plate, but it's got some nice supports in here that are welded in, too. You gotta see the welds on those. So, yeah, well-built bar here. And we've got holes, again, a pair here and a pair over there to accept these bars. Right. So, flip this back upside down on the edge of the table and just kind of put our bars in here loosely. Got to move this one out a bit. And I'm just kind of looking down here and seeing where these things are landing and make sure that I have enough room between them. Like that. Perfect. All right. Let's make sure we get all of this in this shot. Okay. Now, the hardware we're going to be using here is some M6 threaded bolts, and you can see they're solid shanks here until we get to the threaded part, and they have an M5 drive size on top of it. And these are stainless steel units. We're going to be using these little safety nylon nuts, right? And if you saw the M2 review, we use these throughout the build of the cockpit too. And we're going to be using a washer, right? M6 washer. Pretty simple. Putting this together is real simple. It's just a matter of getting all our bolts in. So we have to have 8 of these bolts, and 8 bolts were in the kit. So you just kind of slide them in. And I kind of like to look on the other side and see where it's coming out at. And it's pretty easy to see, really. This is really simple stuff here. And a matter of fact, it's so simple that I think I'm going to go ahead and put them all in and then get them loosely put together but not real tight, and then we'll see what that looks like when we come back. So here we have the base section now assembled. And again, it was pretty simple, just putting in our 4 bolts on each side rather. And I put the socket cap heads on the outside, but you know, it really doesn't matter. It's just an aesthetic kind of thing. If you can see it under, I'd rather see this than these nuts over here, these 10mm safety nuts sitting on the outside. But again, it's a, you know, you can go either way, it'll work, obviously. So once we got this together, then we went in and put the feet in. But we did have a small problem. The holes here that these feet are actually fitting in, remember, all this stuff has been powder coated. And if you don't plug up a threaded hole when you powder coat, then that means the powder coat gets in the threads, and it makes it impossible to thread this in. Very well, not impossible, but very, very difficult, and it can cross thread on you very easily when you're doing that. So I have a nice tap and die set, and yeah, I'm used to tapping holes, so I just grabbed an M10 1.25 that you can see here, tap, put it in my drill, and just what we call chasing the threads. I just chased the threads again, so they were nice and bright and shiny and new, and of course I had to work my way around to all 4 holes. Right, so once that was done, then it's easy to take our feet and just twist them in like they're supposed to go, right? And these feet, by the way, before I get that all the way in there, just want to show you a close-up of this foot. It's got a hard nylon bottom on it there, and we have a 17mm nut and obviously a M10 1.25 thread there, right? So I usually just go ahead and put the nut all the way down, so it gives me some room, and put these all the way in, so if I do need to level this thing, I should have plenty of room to do that, right? And just snug it up with hand tight, because I don't know where I'm going to be yet by the time I get this on there. Now, one more thing about this bottom piece is there's a hole right here in this bar, right? Not one over in this bar, but in this one. And that hole is for, let me go ahead and flip this around for you. It's got a little weight to it in the back, so there we go. All right. So now our hole's over here. And what that is for is there's going to be a big M10 bolt in there. I'm going to show you this rod end assembly they give you. So this is what's going to connect the motor to this bottom chassis, and the motor is going to kind of be mounted to that rolling piece I showed you in the previous segment, and it's going to actually be pushing itself with that roller back and forth. But we need a solid mounting point on the base to be able to achieve that, and that's what this big bolt here is for, and that hole is for. And what I'm going to do is go ahead and pull this big 17mm safety nut off the rod end here, and then what I'm going to do is go in, and you can see this bolt here has got some nuts on it and lock washers. I'm going to take all those off, bring the bolt up through the bottom, and then put both of these bolts on the top again. All right, because that's the way you want this, because we're going to be setting this back on top once it's mounted here, right? And then we're going to put our nut back in. But there might be, you know, we might have to adjust for height here, and that's what these 2 locking nuts here are for, right? So we can lock this stuff down. And we can lock it down on the bottom here. I haven't seen how it goes in just yet, because I haven't got it on there. But yeah, once it's done, you'll be able to see what I ended up with. So then once it's in there, we slide that back on here. And this end, again, is going over to the motor lever, or the lever on the motor, so that we can move the chassis back and forth in the yaw. Pretty cool, actually. So we'll have this done when we come back. I wanted to show you this stationary bolt once I had it in that bar here, all right? And I wasn't sure how it was going to go on, but you can see how I did this here. I'm going to go ahead and turn this sideways. And the head of the bolt, the hex head, is on the bottom. I put one of the lock washers in there, and then I used one of the bolts there to come down and cinch this down tight, so it's very stiff and tight. It's not going anywhere, because it is going to receive all the torque, and it's going to be yanked on back and forth every time a yaw is done. And then I went ahead and put the other nut back on, and there's a lock washer there, and there's enough space between these two that now we can get, when we need to, I can go ahead and put this rod end back on and then secure it with that nylon safety nut on the top. So I just want to give you guys a look at that. So these are 2 17 mils that you need to cinch down real tight, and then we'll go ahead and put the rod end once we have everything else put back on top of it. So what we'll do, we're actually finished with this assembly now. And what we'll do is go over to, let's get this back over here like this, so it doesn't stick in my table. So what we'll do is work on the next assembly and with it's going to have the motor on it, and it's going to be attached to the roller bar. So we'll go ahead and take a look at that when we come back. Now we want to attach our yaw motor to the yaw roller, the rear yaw roller assembly. Now there's a flange on here that has 4 bolt holes in it, and it also has a cut in so that we can actually slide the shaft of the gearbox that's attached to the motor into the flange and then securely attach it. So this will be sitting like this. The motor itself will be sitting, let's see, grab it around this way, it might be a little easier to see. So the motor will be sitting like this. In fact, I can go ahead and slide that in like that, and that's how the motor will be sitting. Now we have to attach this motor to the flange, obviously, and we're going to be using, if you look here, there's 4 holes in this flange on the bottom. Now, I'm not sure if you have to do this with an H3 kit. I got my kits as an H2 and an H3, so I would do a H2 review and then do this upgrade. So I'm not sure if they come pre-attached or not. They may, or you know, who knows. Not only that, but this is the latest upgrade on the rollers on this section also. They're using these skateboard type rollers on here. So it's just a matter of attaching these 6mm screws, or socket head cap screws, right? And they are 5 mils at the top, and we have a washer and a lock washer combination going in here. And also the arm here needs to be changed from this orientation to straight up and down, right? It should be perpendicular to this plane here, right? And I'll change that in the software when I get to that point. It's no big deal. You go into the software, you loosen up the sensor coupler over here, and I can make this angle change and then lock it back down so everything's good again, right? So basically it's just a matter of getting this motor attached at this point. And I'm going to and this is a heavy motor combination here. This stuff is not light by any means. So I'm going to go ahead and try to get one of these 6 mils started here. Looks like that's starting okay. And again, we're just going to go around to every one of the holes, and hopefully this flange is cut properly, and it's not going to give me too much trouble getting all my screws in, which, you know, is always touch and go when you're dealing with these kind of products and you're having to assemble these kind of things. Okay, this is a little tough because I have to get in here between the lever itself, and I don't have great visibility here, but there it goes. I think that's where it went. Okay, feels pretty good. And we got one more that's going down here in the bottom hole. So I'll go ahead and see if I can get that one started. And again, I'm kind of holding the weight with my hand here and kind of moving it around a little bit as I'm trying to get the screw started. And there they go. All right. And of course, what I'll do is come back with an M5 wrench and tighten all these down securely. And then we'll be done with this, actually. Then it'll be sitting like this. And the lever is going to be sticking out, like I said, straight out like this. Like my finger here, sticking out all that way. And it's going to be attached to that rod we saw. If you saw the previous segment about where you saw the rod ends on that long piece of threaded rod. And that rod end is going to be sitting into actually bolted to the lever there. And the other end of the rod end is going to be bolted to that bottom chassis that we just built. So that's how it's going to move itself. So it'll move the lever, and of course the lever is going to actually be staying where it is. It's not really going to be moving. The motor is going to be moving, and of course because it's bolted to this assembly, there you go, huh? You have yaw. Pretty cool. Right, so this is taken care of, and what I'm going to do is when we come back, we're going to look at the other bar that has to go on for the front pivot mechanism and see how all that works. So now what we have to do is get this bar here with a heavy motor mounted on it on the bottom of our frame that we've already built. Now this would be a little easier if I didn't already have the frame built and I could just attach these side rails to these cross members. Now we also have the front piece that you saw before with the pin in it. It's actually going to be the front yaw device, and it's got the 2 wheels here, and they have holes in a little flange here that's going to take the brunt of the weight after we bolt it down. Now this is going to be an easy one to put on. Of course, I shouldn't say that, I guess, until I actually do it. So I'm just going to go ahead and set this here. It might be a little tight, and yeah, there we go. It is tight. But because I've actually built this already, and this is where one of these comes in handy. All right, a little nylon tip here, non-marring deal. You can kind of tap things around to get things lined up. And we have these M10 bolts that have a big 17 mil hex on the end of them. And that's what's going to be attaching these, which is kind of nice. I like that they have these heavy duty bolts that we're putting in here. And by the way, remember I had to chase the threads on that bottom, the base that we built, the rolling base. I had to do the same thing on these rails. So all these had to be retapped or chased, if you will, so that these bolts will actually go into the threads. So I think this is lined up pretty good down here too. See if I can get it to go in. Let's see. There we go. All right. So there's two. And I'll just go ahead and snug those up real quick. I can go ahead and tighten these down good because this is the last chance I'll be able to. So I'm going to make sure that they're good and tight. But remember, we got the whole weight of this rig sitting down on top of this. So yeah, the chance of those bolts coming out are pretty slim. Now, let's do the hard one. That was the easy one. And the reason this is going to be a little hard is because it's heavy. It's not something that's easy to slap on. And we'll be putting it on, let's make sure I get my orientation correct. It'll be this way. All right. So the motor is going to be towards this part, which is, when you're sitting in it, this is the right side. So the motor's transmission or gearbox will be towards the right side. At least that's how I'm going to do it, because that's the way that the bolt on the bottom base that we got sitting over here is sitting on this side, on the left side. So hopefully this will all work out. All right, so it's just a matter of picking this up with one hand and trying to get some bolts started with the other. And I'm going to take one bolt and kind of stick it in my lips. Well, I think I won't do that actually. I'm going to just stick it up here on top of the, I don't know, I got to have it somewhere where I can get to it quick, because this is not going to be the easiest thing to do, I'm sure. So let's go ahead and get that one in. And this one, oh, this one I didn't have to hammer on. Awesome. This might be a little easier. Might go just a little bit easier than I thought it would. I can get my bolt started. And it's always, you never know if you get this stuff right or not. And you only know until you start putting the bolts in, see how things are going. All right, we got two of them started, huh? Okay. And now it's just kind of hanging there. So I can just push the bottom in and get those bolts going. Wow. I'm shocking myself at, let's see, well, it's not in yet, is it? Yeah, it's a little tight here. Let's see if I can get this one going. Seems that it's a little bit tight on this one. It's almost like it needs to come down a little bit. All right, I was afraid of this. Oh no, maybe I can, there we go. There we go. I'm putting down pressure on this. Now I've got them started. And I think I got enough threads in this one. I'm going to kind of gently nudge it with this. Let's see if it'll go on in. Yeah, that's going to be golden. All right. I'm making some noise here, but I'm going to mute that out so you guys don't have to listen to it. And I'm not going to torque down real hard on these, like I said on the front piece, because, you know, it's just a thin piece of that we have these threads inside of this tubing here, and I don't want to strip that out. And these are really going to be fine with 4 or 2 on each side, I think. I just don't want to strip out the threads that we have in there. That would be bad. All right. Well, that actually went a little smoother, actually a lot smoother than I thought it would. So now we have the motor mounted, we have our rollers here, we have our rollers here, and at this point, we're actually ready to take this chassis and set it down on the base. What I'm going to do is bring the base over here that everything's going to be rolling around on, and then I'm going to try to flip this back over on top of the base. And yeah, we'll come back and see how all that went on the next segment. So now I've got the cockpit sitting on the traction platform that we built previously, and I wanted to show you guys how we got this rod end done. You can see it's connected to the bolt, the M10 bolt that we saw before in the assembly process. And let me come across here. And you can see now it's spanning across to the lever on the motor. And the lever, it has been moved to the perpendicular position I was talking about in the previous segment. So it's all hooked in like it should be. Let's come around here, take another look at it. There we have it. And everything's bolted down securely now. And of course, I do testing at this stage. And here's a test of the yaw actually working. And you can see how well that works on these cool skateboard wheels. It really works pretty good. It's very quiet is what's cool about it, I guess. It's silent. You don't even hear the yaw moving. And then, of course, while I'm doing this, I'm going to go ahead and test the roll, make sure that that's working fine, and the travel ends are good. And last but not least, we'll test the pitch and make sure all that travel is working good. And that also when I'm doing this on the pitch and roll, I'm watching those dampers and making sure that they're positioned correctly on the shaft. Because if you have it too high on the shaft, then you'll bottom out towards the top. And if you have it too low, it'll bottom out towards the low in the whole range. So anyway, we're all done now. Everything's bolted and secured as it should be. Now it's just a matter of getting the seat, a wheelbase, and some pedals on here, and we will be good to go for testing, and we'll see that when we come back. I wanted to show you guys a quick look at the controller box that we're going to be using for the H3 system. The H2 system and the M2 system comes with the same box, same dimensions, everything, same two fans on top, but different plug densities on the front end of it. They have 2 on the H2 and the M2. This has 3, of course, because we've got 3 motors, because we're adding that third yaw motor for our traction loss function. Pretty simple here. You got your plugs. These are all the 115. Of course, we're in North America, so 115 voltage, and we got 3 plugs for that. We've got the data plugs down here, and this is right. This is for the right motor. This is for the left motor. This is for the yaw motor, and that's how it worked out when I was running it. So that's how I know. So it's pretty intuitive. Once you get one motor hooked up and it's moving the right way, then you know where to go as far as the rest of it. We've got the usual main switch down here. We've got a USB interface on the front here, and we also have a little heavy there. And I got the top loose. We have a mains on the back, and we have a 5-volt DC plug back here that's used for the emergency stop that you can order as a separate accessory with your kit. I'm going to go ahead and pull this off real quick just to give you a quick peek inside. You've already seen one of these if you saw the M2 review I did a few months back. And same thing going on over here. We just got one more of everything. Let's go ahead and turn this way. There we go. So we've got 3 of these Meanwell supplies in here. These are LRS 350-24, so 24-volt power supplies. And Meanwell, industry standard power supply. I really like that DOF doesn't cheap out on the power supplies and put some decent ones in here. We've got our controller boards over here, and this actually comes up in the utilities as an Arduino board, or Arduino something. I forget the actual name of it. But yeah, that's probably how they program these boards to control the motors. And we have 1, 2, 3 driver boards on the top here. Everything is done real well here as far as the wiring. Shrink tubing is used everywhere it needs to be. Good crimps on everything. And I like the way this is set up because it's very easy to replace something if it goes wrong. If you burn up a driver board, it's very easy to replace these. And these driver boards are the MD13S driver boards. So yeah, if you ever burn one of these up, easy to replace. Just unplug the stuff in the back and unplug this plug here, unscrew it, pop another one in, and there you go. That's what I like about this kind of direct wire stuff. If you have a circuit board in here where everything is surface mounted, obviously then it requires a lot more work. And if you have a rework station and you know what you're doing, you could probably actually fix it, but most people don't, so they end up having to get another circuit board. Anyway, just want to give you a quick look in here, and again, wiring is really professionally done here. All the cable routing is very nice. They do a good job over at DOFReality when they wire these things up. Right, so I just want to give you a closer look at this particular controller box now that we have another driver board in it and another electrical and data plug in here. Now we have the seat, the pedals, and the wheelbase attached, and that was pretty easy. The wheelbase plate is already drilled for the Thrustmaster. I did have to drill a couple of holes for the Thrustmaster pedal set. They have 235 millimeter centers, and yeah, so I had to drill that. The pedal tray didn't fit that one. No big deal, a couple of holes and we're good to go. Seat bolted on with 4 bolts, no dramas here. And I'm using an NRG seat bracket, side mount, and that is an industry standard pattern on that, so that's why it fit this seat. And then was just some extra brackets I had laying around to use, so I used them. And you can see that we have a couple of bolts in the back here, there, and of course down on the front here we also have some. Nice and secure, no dramas. So yeah, so I wanted to go over the Sim Racing Studio application we use to control or tune this motion system. And if you watched my H2 review, then you saw this in that one too. And it's the same application, which is a good thing, because here we actually control what we need to do as far as all of our motion. Now, I'm in the motion tab right now, and you can see I have the model H3 selected. And if we go down, we can see we can actually go all the way down to the H6 or even P6. So it's great that it supports even the 6 DOF platform now. So we're going to leave it on the H3 because that's what we have. We can see it's on and connected. Power is at 100, and this is just the overall power. So no matter what you have on your sliders over here, this will give how much power that the motors are going to be sending to your motion. And it's got plenty of power. Smoothing slider. This helps smooth out the motions. If you feel it's a little bit sudden when it switches from like if you're going to a roll to the right, and then when that stops it comes back to the center, or you're braking and you off the brakes, it can be a little bit how's a good word for it, you can get a little jolt from it, but this is a smoothing slider that helps with that a lot. And of course the dampers that we have on the front 2 motors also help. So this is actually the smoothest simulator for DOFReality rather that I've been in as far as their motion goes. It's much better improved over the original seat mover that I tried, the M2. So we also have boost. Now boost is an effect that actually improves or accentuates going over bumps and curbing, and it really does work. You can actually tell when you're going around Sebring and you're going from asphalt to the concrete patches. You can actually feel that. It picks that up and moves to where you can feel you going over those kinds of different terrains and going down the bumps down the main straightway at Sebring, and you'll see that when we're actually doing the driving. So how you set this really is up to you. You can go to the Sim Racing Studio site, and they have a pretty good config. In fact, it's pretty much what I used for both iRacing and Assetto Corsa when I'm driving, and you'll see that again in the driving segment. So another thing we can do here is important once you first get this thing going, or if you even have a problem somewhere, is the motion test. And that tab will show us all these different DOFs. There's 6 of them up here. And of course, we only have 3 real DOFs, or directions of freedom, in this chassis. We have the yaw, we have pitch, and we have roll. So I'm going to show you here, as I move this slider on pitch, this first one, if I move it down to the FWD, that's forward, and on top it says BWD, all right? Then I'm going to go ahead and move this forward, and it should go forward, and there we go. You can see me moving forward. And I'm going to go past the 0 point and up to the back and backwards. There we go. We're going back. So we know those 2 axes are functioning properly. All right. Now we can go over here to the roll and do the same thing. I'm going to roll left. And there we go. And I'm going to roll back to the right. And yep, all that's working. Okay. Good deal. Get back to 0. And now we'll go to yaw. And I move that slider left and right. So I move this, and yep, going to left, and goes up, and it moves to the right, to the left, to the right, to the left. Actually, I really like the, I've said it a couple of times, but I really like those skateboard wheels they're using here. It's very smooth yaw on this. It's very, very smooth. And I'll go over to traction loss. I believe that should move it too. Let's see. Yeah, there we go. So traction loss will also move it. All right. So yeah, there we have it. That's how we test. And again, we go back to motion. And there's another thing up here that you need to go to their site for tips and tricks and advanced stuff. If I hold the pointer over the pitch and I click on it, I get a max telemetry on the value here for the pitch. Right now it's at 5. That's default, I believe. And I just left it there. But this is another way to even give a finer tune on the motion if you want to play with this stuff. So that's pretty cool that you actually have that. We have it in pitch, we have it in roll. Let's see, it's at 5 in, let's see, roll is 5 right now. They might all be 5 because we're in sitting yet. I don't have the game on, so all these sliders you see maxed out on the top, they'll be all the different levels here once you actually enter the game. And by the way, this app does an excellent job of identifying the game that you're opening. When I went into iRacing, it knew right away. It showed me that I was in iRacing. And the same thing with Assetto Corsa. It showed me I was in Assetto Corsa. So yeah, it's really a good app. Such a small little thing too, you know. But it does a great job. And if you've ever used SimTools to tune a motion system, you are going to love the Sim Racing Studio application. Much simpler and easier to use interface. Not only that, but it's going to open up motion to a lot more people who just don't want to take the time to mess around with the complex applications like SimTools. Right. So yeah, let's go ahead and get in this thing and do some driving. So here we are in iRacing in the Ferrari 488 GT3 at Sebring, and we're in turn 17. Now, the first thing that I noticed about this, and I'm going to be comparing this as far as my thoughts go to the H2 platform, which is just the pitch and roll. And right away, there's a noticeable improvement in overall feel of the chassis in general. And I'm pretty sure the reason is, well, we've added some weight to the back, right? And we have that trolley system insert that's in there now. We've put another one of those heavy motors and gearbox systems back in there. So we've added weight to the overall feel of the chassis as it moves. And these wheels, the skateboard wheels, they are just doing a great job here. I'm not sure if the guys at DOFReality intentionally picked these wheels to use because they were quiet or something. But I tell you what, because they are the skateboard type of urethane, they're actually acting as additional dampeners. Because now the back of the chassis, where in the H2 configuration, it was a solid chassis back there with just a bar going across. Now we have these urethane skateboard wheels that are riding on top of that plate. And because they're urethane, obviously they have a dampening element to them. So instead of having, let's say, a plastic wheel or a hard urethane wheel, this is dampening some of the vibrations and things and the jerkiness out of the chassis or away from the chassis as it transfers to that plate that they're sitting on. I thought, you know, this is great. I didn't really see that coming until I got in here. And you can see the yaw is working. It's not working a whole lot. I haven't really gotten into any slides here, but you can feel it when it moves. In such a tight little short chassis, you're going to feel it more than if you're in a longer chassis, obviously. But yeah, this is, and it's got a lot of power in this. When you see this, I'm gonna flip this car, and I didn't do it intentionally. I was trying to do something else and not paying attention, but I drifted out too far to the wall, and I never do this, but here it is. Watch this. Yeah, that's pretty brutal. That was quite a trip, quite a ride. And that just, again, let me realize that there's really a lot of power in these motors. So we're over in Assetto Corsa now, and here you're going to see the back end moving more. And, you know, different game and different car and setup, so yeah, it just moving more than it did in the iRacing when I was running in there. Now you can change that, obviously. I can tweak that to, you know, increase it and make it move more. But from the stock default settings that I got from Sim Racing Studio, yeah, it was pretty much moving the way it wanted to. And I felt the movement obviously more here than I did in iRacing. But the thing is, I could tell that right away when I got into Assetto Corsa in that Ferrari 488 GT, that, yeah, wow, this thing's moving more in the tail than I was in iRacing. And again, it's just between the H2 and this H3 add-on, or just getting an H3 when you buy it, you know, I know it's more money to get the H3, but this yaw element here that we bolted onto this H2 really improves the overall experience a lot in this chassis, in my opinion. Because before we just had this chassis sitting there with a bar connecting across the back and just sitting on the floor or the feet. And yeah, that was pretty, you could still felt a little bit sudden. There was abrupt movements. Almost jerky. Like some people call it jerky, some people call it abrupt. But yeah, just not as smooth as I wished it could have been, even with the dampers on the front. If you watch that H2 review, you know what I'm talking about. But here, yeah, again, this is just a really great implementation of going with these skateboard wheels to it. Again, very smooth rolling when you're transitioning here in this yaw. When I'm moving, it is very silky smooth, and yeah, it's just absorbing what used to be what I was feeling is what I would call jerkiness in the system. It's just a much smoother system altogether. So, you know, stroke of genius here to these guys for DOFReality for coming up with this, instead of just putting, like, you know, a captured bearing cup in there or something like that, or like, you know, which would be a hard bearing on a hard steel surface. This really does more than just nice smooth rolling. It's actually absorbing or dampening the jerky feeling that you were getting just having the H2, or that the abrupt changes from the motor changing directions. So anyway, yeah, really working out well here with this yaw. And of course, having yaw in another direction of freedom is, yeah, always a good thing. But yeah, like I said, now that I've tried this, I would have to say that, yeah, I would go with the H3 if I could, you know, unless money was really tight, instead of the H2. Or again, like we did here, get the H2. Later on, you can always just add on the H3 like we did here. Anyway, we'll go ahead and get to the final thoughts. Final thoughts on the H3 DOF motion system from DOFReality. You may have watched the previous review I did on the H2 DOF motion system, and a lot of what you saw in that review carries over to this one. I did not do a complete build segment of the cockpit assembly, as I covered that in the H2 review, and I also wanted to show you how you can upgrade an existing H2 system to the yaw-equipped H3 system. I did go into detail on how to assemble the traction loss elements required to make this conversion. As we saw, it's really a pretty easy process to make this upgrade. The only drama I encountered was having to chase some M10 threads on the chassis with a tap to remove the powder coating that had gotten onto the threads. Now, once everything was bolted together, all you have to do is set the H2 platform on top of the newly built traction loss assembly. Then connect the yaw motors lever to the M10 bolt via the threaded rod and rod end assembly we saw before. The kit comes with its own controller box to accommodate all three motors. Once that was done, just a matter of testing the motors to ensure proper movements, and it's time to go racing. Using the Sim Racing Studio app to tune the motion is very easy, and there are plenty of effects for you to play with. If you have ever tuned a motion system with sim tools, then you will just love the SRS controller application. Much, much easier to use. Driving the H3 was much like driving the H2, but of course, now we have traction loss. The DOFReality systems offer a large range of motion. It's not the smoothest motion you can buy, but it does a pretty good job, I think, especially when you consider the price point that it comes in at. All three directions of freedom are easy to feel, and there is plenty of power on hand when you want it. Overall, for the price, I think the DOFReality system is a pretty good one, and they are continuing to improve where they think it needs it. In fact, the motion on the H2 and this H3 unit is much improved over the original M2 seat mover I reviewed a while back. From the emails I get from other sim racers, I know that many are looking for a way to get into motion systems without breaking the bank. I think that this is where the DOFReality motion systems come into their own, and are definitely worth a look. I'm Barry Rowland. Thanks again for watching the Sim Racing Garage channel. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, and if you would like to help support what I do here at the SRG, visit my website at simracinggarage.com.